Hi, guys. Welcome to Mold Dogs Podcast and episode 3, brought to you by the team of Paws on Mold. I'm Tim Lyons with my co-host Sean Gallivan. And today's episode, we're going to dive into training and how to train a mold dog. So, Sean, how do you train a mold dog?
So like we talked about earlier in episode 1 and 2, they're very, very similar to explosive detection dog and narcotic detection dogs. Always got to start with the imprinting phase. The imprinting phase is we take a cinder block out with a paint can and the dog goes over to the odor and the dog gets a reward. And then we do that for probably about 4 days. The dog does it again, the dog gets a reward. We play with the dog, we get the reward back. We tell the dog to search, the dog goes to it, dog gets a reward. Over and over and over. So now on day 3 or day 4, you put in 5 cinder blocks into that mix now. So now what's going to end up happening is the dog's going to go to the first cinder block, look at you for a reward, you're not going to get it. Second cinder block, look at you for a reward, you're not going to get it. They're going to keep doing that same behavior until they get to the last cinder block with the reward, with the odor in it. Once they do that, they're going to look at you for a reward and instantly snap back at the box. When they snap back at the box, that's them making the understanding that they're realizing that I was getting paid those last 3 days because of this cinder block and this odor, not just because of the cinder block. So now you're starting to have, correlation starting to happening. Once we start having that happen and the dog starts to understand, the second one is going to be 10 times easier than that last one was, where the dog is going to guess the whole time because the dog is instantly going to start going towards that reward or towards that odor. Once we have the dog dialed into that odor, we're going to start lifting the odor off of the ground, where we start putting it into the wall. We start putting it into cabinets. We want to make sure the headspace is there to where if the odor is here and there's a cabinet that's going all the way to right here, that my dog is still going to sniff it, even though the dog's nose is not completely on the odor. We want to make sure that the dog is still going to show, like if it's behind a drywall and it's all the way over here, and we want to make sure that the dog is sniffing through a hole in the wall or through the electrical outlet right here, that's where the dog is going to pinpoint it. So we want to make sure the dog is going to still indicate on odor. Once we have that, it's all about making sure that the dog is on live odor. The dog is hitting live odor every single day, is on different live odors. And then we want to make sure that we have scent discrimination.
Yeah, awesome. And so you mentioned live odors, and so we've talked about that. So in the beginning of this, it's something that you wanted to do from the beginning is live odor. And the very beginning was challenging to get the odors. Now we found the source for that. But can you tell us about how we started, what we started with?
Yeah,
What's the product called?
So we started with ScentLogic.
ScentLogic, yeah, guys, ScentLogic is a training aid developed by a very smart man, and it's a non-biohazardous training aid. They make a narcotics. They make a synthetic heroin, synthetic marijuana. He's got the full line of explosive training aids, and they make a mold. And so this is it's made to synthetic mold, and it's made to replicate varieties of different molds.
Sure.
So tell me about it.
So I think ScentLogic definitely has its pros and its cons. We imprinted on ScentLogic, but almost simultaneously we started imprinting on live mold because we knew how the significance of live mold was going to be. Live mold, there's just nothing can compare to the live odor in any field that you're in, whether it's explosives, narcotics. You want to make sure live is really what you're training on. But ScentLogic is good if you're in a stretch and you really need to do a one search and you don't have anything, I suppose.
I mean, I think definitely I agree with you. You know a lot more than me on this, but I agree with you. I think we saw some value in ScentLogic, but like you mentioned, it definitely opens up their scent profile, I think, a little bit more than should. And I think to think like all the different mold strains smell the same, I think is pretty naive.
For
and
sure.
So I thought it was naive before I dove in and researched it. And, after talking with mycologists and microbiologists, and they're like, Stachybotrys smells nothing like Cladosporium, or Tritonium smells nothing like Fusarium to them. And so now I get it. There's some detection work where they talk about how the dog can start to associate, right? So if you talk to the owner of ScentLogic, he'll say the rebuttal to that is a good dog will associate those smells.
For sure.
And
we've talked about that, thinking is it almost the bacteria that the dog is indicating on, not necessarily the mold itself. So.
Right. And we've heard now through because we do talk to other mold dogs across the country and stuff, and not as much as we'd like. We'd love to be able to communicate more, because I think it's important to everyone to share. I just think it's important for the growth of the industry. But we talked to some ones out west that were missing a significant amount of toxic Stachybotrys. And I felt like we both were like not surprised, because we felt like Stachy in particular has a extremely different smell than Scent Logic. Somebody I respect greatly, who's a microbiologist, bless you, says the Scent Logic to him smells like a cornucopia of microbial growth that maybe smells more like mushrooms. And so, but I will say that there's value to it. I know that you've trained other dogs on Scent Logic in other fields, right? And had to get those, work with those dogs, and those dogs ended up being really good dogs for you. So, but we've made the decision to just completely do the live mold. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's like, now that we have, we're, working with the live mold, but I think it's important to work with like the different type, like working with dry live mold, working with wet live
all
mold,
different types.
right?
Yeah, we
working
want all
with dry mold on wood, working with making sure the dog can indicate on wet mold on wood, and right, all this good stuff.
That all comes down to the scent profile and the difference of it. We want to make sure that we can lock into it. That's why training is so imperative.
Yeah, it really is. It's the dog teaches you something every day, and the dog is so smart that if you don't, from what I've learned, that if you're not constantly changing up your training habits, right? Changing up what your target odor is in. That there's many things that
there's
are
our
crazy.
false
So
cueing,
let me grab this, since we got this is over here. Since we're talking about training, what we got here, this is something, perfect example. So this is a canine BSD. So this is a canine behavioral shaping device. So Sean, can you tell me a little bit about this?
So what this is good for and used for is that whenever you're starting to train, like with cinder blocks, when we started doing our imprinting process, what happens is that our dog doesn't know that the reward is coming from us, because we're starting to kind of throw it over the dog's head. The dog doesn't really understand the game. Once the dog starts to understand the game, what happens is now the dog starts to go to odor and starts looking back at you and starts breaking away from odor. So we don't want a dog to break away from odor. We want a nice lock and stare to where our dog is just going to sit there at our odor, which gives us, the handler, clear communication on, okay, this is where we're starting to indicate on. And then that's when the reward starts to come out and pops out of the box itself. So now, instead of the dog fixating on me, the dog is fixating on the box.
Right. And so, and you don't mean the difference between, like, there's a difference between you calling him off odor for his reward and the dog coming off odor because he wants his reward.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because sometimes you taught Zuko, we to do two ways. One, sometimes we pay him over his head, but sometimes we're in homes. We might be searching. The other day we searched an incredible wine cellar, which had some incredible wines in it. And so he alerted on it, and I just can't throw a ball at a bottle of 85 Bordeaux.
Well, that comes down to the same thing as an explosive detection dog. It's like an explosive detection dog. Through training, we're going to be throwing the ball over their head, because the dog is locking in on odor, and the dog is going to attack the ball that gets thrown. But when you're working with an explosive and you're in the field and your dog actually does a live find, I'm not throwing a ball anywhere near anything. You know, we're going to make sure that we're going to call the dog back to us, and the dog is going to get a reward right from me. So it all comes down to, I want to make sure the dog is locking. And again, we were talking about this, I think, in episode 2, is we train for our day in the field, and we don't wait for our day in the field and hope that we're ready because we trained a year ago. We train every single day because we want to be field ready. Yeah,
good point. So this, these things have been great, and like you said, they're great for imprinting, but then they're also great for continuing to making sure that we're continuing to lock in that stare, because it starts to become an issue. So if you're having to pay the dog constantly from yourself after he gets his reward, it's going to be challenging to keep him locked in on that all the time, and long enough to where you know where the find is, right?
For sure.
All of a sudden, you've been going through and just boom. So the what you always say, obedient to order and making the source the most important thing in the game, basically, right? Yeah. All right. So we talked about pros and cons, and we talked about ScentLogic definitely has a place in the industry and has done some amazing things, and his mission is amazing. But do you feel, as far as mold, do you feel a dog, if it's only been imprinted on ScentLogic, it's only been trained on ScentLogic, do you feel like that dog should be working in homes, and do you feel that the dog is a chance is gonna miss some items, miss mold, because if it's only been introduced to ScentLogic?
Absolutely. I think that ScentLogic should not be the only odor utilized to go into a house. If you're going into a house, it's the same reason. If you're going for a TSA, you do a certification on live odor. You're not doing a certification on ScentLogic. If you're working as a police and you're going through NAPWADA or UPWADA, you're doing a certification on live odor. You're not doing anything on ScentLogic. You may train on it, and it may have a very good chemical compound that's similar to the actual live odor itself, which is why it makes it a good training aid. But at the end of the day, live odor is just a little bit different than the ScentLogic. So if you're going to train, and I want to make sure that I have an accurate guess or an accurate answer, I want to make sure that the dog's not guessing, and that's where we want to make sure the dog's on the odor that we're searching for.
It's never going to go into a home and find ScentLogic, is it?
Never.
So I think that seems to be the answer. I hope because we did, and I think it's really important. I just don't think even after the training, if your training is only we're lucky here because you have an amazing facility and a big facility. We were able to set up scent walls and all sorts of things. And of course, we trained at Depot, and we trained at my house. We trained at your house and
Sure.
there. And then even after that, we trained. Got some more friends and stuff. But even then, I don't think it's like. I think that you need to, we recommend if you have a dog is to vet the dog, is to do as many houses as you can for free.
Absolutely.
And don't think of it as anything, but that know that it's going to, I think, help you in the long run. And if you, I'll say too, if you're not a dog handler and you don't live close to your trainer, think twice about getting a mold dog. Because I can see, as blessed that we are to have you close by, it's still challenging.
For sure.
Right? I think we're in a unique...
I'm sure something that a lot of people can kind of correlate to is how many people have gotten their dogs trained, and how awesome does the dog look at the training facility compared to where the dog comes home. The dog quickly declines, especially if they're not with a trained handler or the trainer.
Yeah.
And so that's the whole point, is that you want to make sure that the training is consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, you always, most of the time you talk about because with your other business, GI Canine, you do a lot of obedience training, and you talk about how it's mostly you're training the humans.
Yeah.
You're training the humans what not to do. And I definitely, that has resonated with me in this journey. So we've talked about the first two in this journey of detection work. So basically the dog, all the variables of the dog, and the dog has to have all these, right, almost genetics and drive and work, right? Then you got the handler, and the handler's got to be doing all his job, making sure he's doing right. And the third layer to that, and it not exclusive to mold detection, because I think probably officers struggle in narcotics detection getting pure odor. Mm-hmm. But I think the last layer to that for the mold detection is getting the odor. What are you training? What are you actually training your dog on? Like, are you getting the right odor? And if you're training, because we talked about, you should be training on the mold that you're finding in homes.
For sure.
The actual mold you're finding in homes, you should be training on them. But what do you do to make sure that that dog is not, he's not only smelling the mold, but he's really indicating on the drywall that we're training him on.
So that's where scent discrimination is huge. And what scent discrimination really means is that if I have this box right here and I have this drywall with a specific mold inside of that, then what I want to make sure is that I have this drywall and that drywall and this and drywall. And I want to have a bunch of the same drywall that mold is on all over the place. And I want that dog to not indicate on drywall. I want that dog to indicate on this one with the specific mold on the same drywall, you know? So that when my dog comes in and there's 5 boxes, I don't want it to look like imprinting stage 1 where the dog is looking for a reward, looking for a reward, looking for a reward. I want my dog to sniff, 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 hit, sniff, sniff, and then we already know the dog is hit on here. This is the only thing that's active, and we keep going on with our search and we try to find more.
And it's not like, because in the setup, it's not like there's nothing wrong with the dog, because initially on in training, there's a good chance that he might, if we have a clean piece of drywall in there and he's been training for a few days only with the moldy drywall, now we're introducing that extra layer, right?
Yeah.
That distractor. And now we have that he might indicate it on the first time. But the good news in training is that we're not going to pay him, right?
For sure.
So he's not going to get rewarded. So he might scratch at that box. He might chew at that box thinking he's going to get his ball. But it's not until we are pulling him over, or not pulling him, until you always talk about letting the dog make the decision early on, right? So the dog is making a decision to come on over here to sniff this one, and boom, then he gets rewarded. So, yeah, and so I think it keeps me up a little bit at night too when you're training on when you're training on mold on drywall, and then we do scent discrimination, and then we get the clean piece of that drywall, right? Do we have the same drywall brand?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So
like
hard to know.
It's so hard to know, and there's so if you're not I think what it got me to believe, it's like if you're not thinking of these things and the way you're training, the way you're presenting these things to your dog, then you're not doing it.
Or how many times do you go into a house and maybe there's 3 different types of drywall? There's this type of drywall in the living room.
So you got waterproof, got the green board, white, sure.
And if you're only training on the waterproof, which is in your bathroom, and your dog is going to indicate on every single bathroom because that's what the dog has been imprinted on, was a certain type of drywall. We want to make sure that the dog is not imprinting on drywall. The dog is not imprinted on wood. The dog is not imprinted on insulation. However, the dog will still find mold on all 3.
Yeah, because because it's going to smell that insulation.
Yeah.
But it's got to almost separate it.
For sure.
And it's almost like...
Well, it just comes down to like a blood sugar dog. If you have a dog with blood sugar, if I take your odor right now and your sugar is elevated right here, think about the difference in the smell between your blood with your sugar here and your sugar here. Almost identical.
Sure.
But yet a dog can still differentiate, and that's how you have a service dog for your blood sugar, is that once your blood sugar goes from here and starts to get to a controlled low, now your dog starts indicating on you. So if a dog can differentiate such a small pinpoint thing like that, dogs should definitely be able to do it for, of course, for molds. So anyway, guys, that wraps up for episode 3. Thank you. Like, comment, and subscribe. And if you guys have any questions, please put it in our comments and we'll do it on our next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one.